No, it's very much a family affair. So thanks, Dad, and my mom's there too. They're definitely crowd plants. They will be asking me softball questions if you guys don't ask me those questions. So good morning, everybody. I'm super excited to be here today. Thank you all for having me. I'm very excited to talk to you guys today about SupplyPike. That, of course, is a company that I work at today. We're going to be focusing on kind of how we built SupplyPike up to our first $1 million in revenue. When Mimi invited me to speak, I was really excited for the opportunity. It's kind of crazy. I'm sure most of you guys can identify when you're in the weeds, first starting your company. You kind of have your nose to the laptop, so to speak, for so long that you forget to like stop and look up and go, oh wait, we've actually like accomplished things. Like we're getting invited to talk at places. That's crazy. Someone wants to hear from me. So hopefully this is a super conversational, talk today. If you guys have any questions, you're curious about anything, please feel free to stop me. I don't want to kind of be talking at you for an hour. I think we all learn by asking questions, and I'd love to hear insights from you guys as well. If you're in a similar part in your journey, definitely feel free to shout that out as well. It takes a village, and this is the village, right? So that's pretty exciting. So really quick, a very quick hello. I'm definitely not wearing that same top today. It's fine. Don't worry about it, guys. Girls, when you find that one top that you're like, I think I look pretty good, and you're like, I'm going to wear this everywhere. So that's this top, okay? It's fine. But I lead the retail insights and sales teams at SupplyPike. Obviously, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about SupplyPike today, but I always think it's a little fun to see a little peek behind the curtain about the people that drive the people, right? So I'm really proud of my family. You guys will see. So I am married to my husband, Clint. We've been married for 6 years now, crazy. And that little nugget in the middle is Charlie. He's the real love of my life, which I tell my husband regularly. We did our first trick-or-treat yesterday. It was a success. When he learned that you can ring a doorbell and get candy, let me tell you, that kid was bought in. So we were out there for like an hour yesterday. In addition to running a startup and being married and having a child, I also have a menagerie because, of course, girls, we do it all, right? But the golden retriever in the middle, that's Harvey. And then I have 2 cats, Ari and Milo. So I'm a dog and a cat girl. So, yeah. Okay, so I get a lot of questions, especially in Northwest Arkansas, because if you guys are familiar, you all know it's Walmart world, right? So you either work at Walmart or you work for Walmart in some capacity. And we don't exactly do that. So at SupplyPike, we're a software company. And so I get this question a lot. So like, what is it that you do again? And I thought it'd be, probably helpful to give you guys a little bit of context of the company, just because if we're going to be talking about it for an hour, I want to make sure that we're all kind of level set on what it is that SupplyPike actually does. So I'll kind of zoom out, 10,000 foot view in the retail world. So anytime you guys go to like a Walmart or a Target or any retailer and you pick a product up off of a shelf, you're purchasing a product from a supplier, right? So I'm sure you guys have heard of the Unilevers and the Kellogg's and the P&G's of the world. And if you can believe it, in the retail world, it's actually really common for suppliers to not get paid every dollar that they're owed. And what that means is, so let's say Walmart, in this example, not because they're here, but Walmart orders 100 cases of cereal from Kellogg's, now known as Kellanova. They need to workshop that name, that's fine. So Kellanova will then go, great, I'm gonna send you an invoice for those 100 cases because I delivered those 100 cases to you. Walmart can oftentimes short pay that invoice. So they'll go, oh, I'm only gonna pay you for 75 cases. And sometimes it's for a completely valid reason. Maybe truly 25 of those cases were damaged. So, hey, I couldn't sell them. Kellogg's, I'm not gonna pay you for those 25 cases. But a lot of times what actually ends up happening is there is an invalid receiving. So some guy in a warehouse somewhere miscounted the number of cases that was received. And therefore, as a result, this company, this particular supplier did not get paid in full. So on average, suppliers will actually lose about 6% off every invoice invoice that they are sending to retailers. So imagine for every single dollar, you're only going to get paid 94 cents. And that is just, sometimes it's valid, sometimes it's not, and it's not great. So I wanted to highlight a couple of just example headlines for you guys of the, like, this is a real problem that suppliers are going through. So you can see here, one of the suppliers that was interviewed, this was in Bloomberg, October 2022, you can freaking bankrupt your company. So this is, on average, 6%. We work with some companies that sometimes they will lose about 50% off invoice. It's crazy. And you guys know, if any one of you are kind of working in the retail or CPG space, margins are razor, razor thin, right? Here's another fun one. Walmart demands suppliers to comply 98% on time and in full. Meaning if Walmart orders 100 cases to arrive on Thursday, 98% of those cases have to be there on Thursday and 98% in full. But look at when this rule was imposed. September 2020, right in the middle of a global pandemic. Yeah, so in the middle of people not being able to figure out supply chains, Walmart was like, you know what we need to do? Make it harder for people. And then here's another fun one. Amazon is taking half of each sale from its merchants. So it is very, very hard for suppliers to kind of stay afloat, especially in this economy. I think a lot of times entrepreneurs, ourselves included, we focus so heavily on the top line dollar, right? Make that sale, make that sale, make that sale, that we stop and sometimes forget to think about, are we protecting the bottom line as well? Are we making sure that we're efficient with the dollars that we're actually getting in? Because if for every dollar you're giving 50% of it to someone else, you're really not going to be as profitable as you think you are, right? So it's a holistic picture of top line dollars and bottom line profitability. So at these retailers, there is a process to get that money back. So, you know, these Walmarts and Targets and Krogers of the world do acknowledge, they're like, yeah, fair enough, probably sometimes we shouldn't take your money back, haha. But they make the process to actually get this money back very, very tedious. It's very, very manual. Just to give you guys an example, so at Walmart, the average claim dispute, so they call it a dispute because you have to go to Walmart and basically say, hey, you owe me this money. It takes about 20 steps, 32 clicks, and 15 to 30 minutes to complete for each dispute. And to give you guys a little bit of context to kind of, you know, say, so how big is that pain point really? So if you're a smaller supplier, maybe you have one SKU that you're selling to Walmart, usually you're probably, if you're, you know, across entire national distribution, you're probably gonna have about 40 POs or purchase orders a week. On every purchase order, you'll send an invoice, and on every invoice, you can get a deduction. So you're dealing with about 40 a week with one SKU, right? And if it takes you about 15 to 30 minutes, that's about 20 man-hours per week of some person just sitting there keying these in and doing research. It's crazy. Now, obviously, scale that up to a Kellogg's or a Unilever or a P&G who are receiving literally hundreds, sometimes thousands of POs a week, and you can see how this problem gets out of hand really, really fast. So I wanted to show you guys some fun screenshots. These are real screenshots of some of the systems that suppliers have to utilize today if they want to try and get their money back. So like, love that vibe, giving very 90s early internet. You'll see in the middle of the screen, there's this microfilm number, like a 70s James Bond movie. Like, who, microfilm, guys? Come on. And they literally use microfilm, by the way. And if you don't know what that is, Google that later. That's just, I'm old now. I'm an oldie. Here's another fun one. Look at that. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Imagine every single one of these folders, you can click into like other subsets of folders to like get the data that you need to fight this. So it's not great. It's not fun for anybody. So as you can imagine, obviously big pain point there. And this is where SupplyPike comes in. So this is not a pitch. I'm not going to sell you guys on SupplyPike or read this very long slide. But as you guys can imagine, essentially what we do is we automate this process end to end. So rather than having, you know, some poor company have to dedicate, you know, either, you know, we've actually worked with companies that pre-SupplyPike would have a team of literally about 40 people just doing this for Walmart, and that's their full-time jobs. And we were able to basically automate that process utilizing software. Software never sleeps, right? And take that down to 2 people managing SupplyPike and being able to, in fact, actually be more productive utilizing what we do. So basically, we integrate directly with the retailer portals. So we support, you can see there, Amazon, Walmart, Target, Kroger. And basically, we're going in, we're pulling all of that data, we're extracting all the data, we're harmonizing it, we're aggregating it, and then we're helping suppliers to actually submit the disputes, and then we're tracking it all the way through. So we'll help you identify if you have any deductions. We'll actually validate those deductions for you, so you don't even have to research them. We'll tell you, yes, you should fight this, or no, you shouldn't. This was actually your fault. Anyone that you should fight, we'll find all the proof documentation for you, submit it, and then you're good to go. So that is kind of the beauty of what we do. And today, we have actually helped our suppliers recover about $600 million in the last year and a half, which is pretty cool. And I think the thing that always, and these are some of the brands that we're really proud to say that we work with. And I think one of the really cool things that, that really helps drive us every single day at SupplyPike is this is money that a lot of suppliers, number one, didn't know was taken, or number two, just wouldn't have the resources or time to go after. So this is directly impacting not only their bottom line, but think about it as consumers. This is taking and giving money back so that they can reinvest it and actually make sure that product is more affordable for us. Because if you think about it, if you are a supplier and you have no way of getting this money back, usually what ends up happening is they're going to bake this into the costs that they sell to Walmart and Target, right? If I know 6% of every invoice I send I'm not going to get, guess what? That price just went up 6% to them, which then went up 6% to you, right? So if we're able to help get that back, they can reinvest it in other parts of their business, and really, hopefully, we try to make sure that we are really getting, everyday low price, everyday low cost for normal consumers like us. So that's pretty cool what we do. Any questions, guys? I know this was just like a lot of information really fast.
So does Walmart pay you for
that? That's a good question. We get asked a lot. So does Walmart know you exist? So Walmart does, and I know it seems counterintuitive, but we actually kind of have the same overarching goals, because at the end of the day, we all want efficient suppliers. I know for suppliers, it can really feel like Walmart is picking on you, or Walmart is trying to get every single dollar out of you, and sometimes that's true. But at the end of the day, Walmart makes more money by having product on the shelf than by nickel and diming the supplier, right? So if they're able to get a more efficient supply chain, a more efficient supplier, they can actually drive their top line dollars, and they will have more collaborative relationships with their suppliers. So in the end, we all kind of have the same overarching goal. So we do a lot of co-sponsored events with Walmart. We've had Walmart leadership come speak at our events. So we understand kind of the delicate balance there. So we're not in their face too much, but I think we all have the same, again, just overarching goal there. But great question. Any other questions? Cool. Okay, so that is where SupplyPike is today, but I think really the point of our conversation this morning is how did we actually get here, right? So what was that journey from 0 to $1 million? So I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna hop into a time machine. We're gonna go back 5 years to the birth of SupplyPike. So SupplyPike actually started as the brainchild of our founder and CEO, Dan Sanker. So if you guys are active in the startup community up in Northwest Arkansas, Dan is usually hanging out at Blake Street. And he has been around in the area for over 20 years. He's originally from California. He's awesome. Interestingly enough, we actually started as a research and development division of K-Stack, which is one of the 3PLs up in Northwest Arkansas. And what happened was, we were responsible for actually creating a lot of the technology that K-Stack utilized. So transportation management systems, order management systems, things like that. So in 2018, K-Stack was actually purchased by another company called Hub Group. They're up in Chicago. And at that point, we spun out to become our own individual entity, and Dan actually successfully raised about $15 million in Series A funding, which is pretty exciting. And at the time, we were tasked with making, and I quote, cool retail tech Does anyone know what that means? Because like, no, we didn't either. They're like, cool, just find something cool and make it and sell it. And we're like, awesome, thank you guys. We're not terrified at all. K-Stack. So K-Stack is a freight broker. So they're responsible with helping actually get product across the United States. Yeah, so that was us, 2018, but it's fine. We're going to talk about how we got from there to where we are today. So I thought I would kind of break up our journey into, I'm borrowing something from Taylor Swift, so if you guys have any Swifties in the crowd, these are our eras. Yeah, there's a dance party after this. But this is the Seek era, so the very, very early days of SupplyPike. And I thought I would also kind of break it up into these different silos, so talking about kind of our mentality, so what we were thinking of at the time, what product looked like, what our sales motion looked like, and I think too kind of the unsung heroes of the startup world are the people side, right? Everyone likes to talk about product and everyone wants to talk about sales, but no one really wants to talk about the people structure, and that's really important. But also talking about what admin look like. So what did the ops process do? So my sister actually runs the operations at SupplyPike. So do I have any ops girlies in the crowd? Yeah, okay. So we'll give you guys lots of shout outs in this one. But yeah, so early days mentality, as you guys can imagine, and maybe some of you guys are in this phase right now, it's startup mode, right? So it's go, go, go. Everyone does everything. It was that move fast, break things mentality. We tried everything with what is called a fail fast mentality, and this is actually something that's kind of borrowed a little bit from the software space, right? So I know if any of you guys are kind of more in the tangible product space, it's a little bit harder to have the fail fast mentality because there's so much capital that goes into tangible products. With software, it's a little bit easier, right? Because you can push code, and if it doesn't work, you can pull the code back, tweak it, push code again. So we had a little bit of an unfair advantage in that aspect, but we had a little bit of that philosophy going on. We also utilized a lot of the lean startup or agile philosophy. Does anyone know? Venture Center, I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with lean startup concepts. Yep. So we were very much leaning into that, and I'll show you guys some screenshots of some of the actual like lean canvases that we did. We're taking it way back. Yeah. So that was kind of the mentality, right? It's just, hey, we got a lot of money and we got to make money fast. So how can we do that, and what's the fastest way to do that? So on the product side, this is when we were really searching for that product market fit. So how do we find a product that is going to resonate with the market? And we began by conducting consumer research interviews, and we started with the pain in mind. So I think this is kind of a unique concept to the startup world. So again, if you guys are any Venture Center alums, you're probably very familiar with this, but I have a retail background, and so, so we do it the exact opposite, right? So the more common or traditional method of product development is you make the product because maybe you had a pain in your life, and then you go around and say, I had this problem, so everyone should have this problem, right? So I'm going to go sell that, and hopefully enough people, that resonates with enough people, and you're able to make that happen. But more often than not, this is where a lot of people get tripped up. And so they start with their pain in mind and then try to generalize it to others. The startup methodology and mindset is you start with customers' pains in mind and understand what their pain points are so that you can start to build a solution around that pain point. And that's a lot faster way to get to product market fit. So we did lots and lots and lots of customer research interviews. Thankfully, because we were tasked with the cool retail tech and we're in Northwest Arkansas, we had a lot of suppliers to interview. So we did, I think, close to 200 interviews in the early days. Yeah, it was a lot of buying people coffee, especially for, we're a company that, people literally, who are you? But please tell us your secrets, guys, your deepest, darkest fears. It's fine. So on the sales front, who's she? We didn't have any sales in the early days, right? So sales were exactly $0. But at the time, we had a really big focus on research to identify your TAM, your SAM, and your ICP. So these are not just, letters that I made up for my son's nursery rhymes. TAM is a total addressable market. SAM is your serviceable addressable market, and your ICP is your ideal customer profile. So if you guys are kind of at this stage, I really, really recommend understanding your customer base, because this is the people that you're going to be understanding the pain from and eventually selling to. And we utilize a lot of the initial customer research as basis for our collateral. So as we started to get our website together, started to get initial sales sheets together, we were using actual phrases from the customers and prospects that we were talking to utilize in our collateral. From a people perspective, at the time, very, very small org, so we were a flat hierarchy. Basically, everyone reported to the CEO, and you were the team. And I'm sure, again, some of you guys are probably at that stage in your journey, and we're like, you are sales, and you are HR, and you are the product guy. So pretty much anything that you had to do to get it done, that's what we did at the time, right? From an admin perspective, minimal processes and policies. I'm pretty sure we had like one expense card for like the whole company, and you just like passed it along from people to people, and hoped for the best and like yelled at everyone about receipts. And no real metrics were tracked because there weren't metrics to be tracked at the time, right? So that was kind of early days. I would say we probably spent about 6 months in this phase. So just head down doing a lot of research there. Any questions, guys, on any of this? Is anyone kind of in this phase of the startup world?
Funded this phase?
So this was when we had our Series A funding. Yep. So a little bit lucky in that aspect that we had the time to be able to kind of do this sort of work. So I wanted to show you guys some fun screenshots. Again, if you guys have done any startup anything, you know this. But we did the lean canvas, right? So we did the work. And this is one of like 18,000 different lean canvases that I found in the SupplyPike vault. We constantly iterated, changed, updated as we learned things, interviewed people, learned more. This was changed all the time. We actually had this, like a really big poster size of it printed out across our company, and then we would like change things out, cross things up, and print a new copy, like I think once a week at that point. So that was our lean canvas. We also did personas, which someone was telling me personas are going out of style now, which I was like, man, that's how long I've been doing this. But if you guys haven't done this, I think it's really important. Just really understand, so the persona, the concept of this is for you to basically write up a fake individual of like who your customer could be, right? So then you really get into their shoes. You talk about what their goals are, what their frustrations are, usually what's their gender, their age, their archetype, their education level, because that is going to help you tailor your product and again, your collateral against who you're actually selling to. So again, very common misconception is you write collateral that's going to resonate with you, but really you need to think about what is going to resonate with the people that you're selling to. So here's an example of a customer interview template, and I'm sure Mimi can share this with you guys if you want a copy of this later on. But you can see here we had quantitative questions, we had people questions, and then we had problem questions. But again, all of it was really, so the quantitative and people were to set the context, so to understand kind of where their role was. And then you'll notice that it says specifically problem questions. It's trying to really understand and dig into their pain points at that time. Okay, so now we're evolving, guys. We're getting into the build era of SupplyPike. So this was probably the next year after that. So we have started, I'm gonna start with the product one because I think this is a pretty interesting concept that, again, if you're not super familiar with startup world, I'll show you guys some interesting charts. So we found a few customers with pain that was great enough that they were willing to actually start beta testing products with us. So has anyone ever seen the product adoption curve before? Maybe something you guys are familiar with? Yeah? So this is the innovators and early adopters is really kind of where we were in our journey at the time. And these folks are usually characterized by having pain that is so intense that they're usually trying to solve it themselves. So they have cobbled some form of something together. And if you are able to find these guys, they're willing to go in on a janky product with you and pay you, a pretty decent amount of money because the pain is so great that any sort of solution you can give them, they're willing to work with, right? So at the time, we were able to settle on deductions. So after doing all of our customer interviews, we found out getting paid was one of the biggest problems that our suppliers had. And so, we found a couple of customers that we would beta test products with, our early adopters. And then we also did something called concierging. So has anyone had to do this? Anyone in startup or software world by chance, concierging? Have you guys ever had, yeah, the pain. So concierging is a concept where it's definitely not lying. And it's definitely when you tell your prospects that you definitely have that feature in the application. And it's definitely not your poor customer success team in the back like, yeah, it's fine, guys, it's fine, I have a funny story with that. So our CEO was actually pitching to one of our early prospects, and they had wanted dashboarding in the application. Apologies. And they wanted dashboarding in the application, which we did not have at the time. And so our CEO was in Los Angeles at the time and with a team. And as he was demoing our product live, we were in Northwest Arkansas, literally updating tables and pushing data. And then he would refresh the page and be like, see? It works. That's what you do, right, in the early days. And so you concierge to get more customers onto the platform with the expectation that you don't torture your customer success team and product development, so the app eventually catches up, right? So along with that, we were obviously able to land our first few customers. And I think this is another kind of interesting concept is that, so pricing was very, very low in the early days, right? So we had no idea of what we could sell our product for. And so we had a focus on market share rather than revenue. So our board really pushed that for us. And they were saying, we want you to flood the market. We want you to be the de facto deductions platform rather than worrying about revenue, because we can worry about that later on. So that was our take at the time. And then we started to build out a lead generation arm. So, hey, that's really cool that we were able to sell to the first, 10 customers, but how do you make sure you have a steady stream of potential customers that you can talk to and convert and eventually turn into an actual kind of subscriber to the platform? So along with that kind of evolution in product and sales, you can see that with the mentality, we started to become a lot more intentional with our resources, right? So it wasn't just it wasn't the wild, wild west anymore. Now we had a product, and we had to make sure that if you have 40 hours of dev time, how do you make sure that you're using those 40 hours in the most efficient way possible to either, get those concierge products up to speed or start to build new features to attract kind of the next round of customers. On the people side, so teams began to start forming, right? So you actually have a product to sell. So we started to have teams that organically began forming, and then the lead started reporting to the CEO. And I think another interesting part of where we were in this part is we began to understand gaps that we had in the organization. So very, very early days, you don't really know what the gaps are because you don't really know what you're doing. But once you understand, hey, this is the product that's actually starting to take off, these are the sales motions that we actually need to be able to land and understand, you now say, okay, do we have this within our internal organization, yes or no? And if we don't, okay, great, now we understand that we need to start hiring to fill those gaps. From an admin perspective, started setting up expense reports, who's she? Similar policies, so we started having things like PTO policies, and keep in mind, so at the time, very, very young company, very few of us were married, even fewer people had kids. And so we look back now and we're like, man, we should have figured out the maternity leave a lot sooner, but we're doing better, and then at this point is when we started tracking everything. So suddenly you have sales, suddenly you have actual active users, and so now you start tracking every single metric because we didn't know which metric mattered yet, right? So we became metrics obsessed at this point, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's important to find the metrics that matter when you're talking about driving results at your company, because it's very possible to become metrics blind and be, kind of driven astray by things that maybe don't necessarily drive your business forward. Any questions on this part, guys, on our build era?
How many people were you at this point?
So at this point, great question. We were at about 40 people, about 30, 40 people. And at this point, it was, so in our seek and build era, we were a majority product and dev at this point. Later on, right now, we're probably at about 60% sales and marketing, 40% R&D product dev, which I think is pretty common. Yep, JJ?
Everything done in-house or outsourced?
Great question. Yeah, so everything is 100% in-house, and to this day. So our entire dev team is SupplyPike. It is located, I think 90%, 95% of our dev team is in Northwest Arkansas. I think we've got one in Atlanta and one in LA or something like that. Great question. Chat?
Once you actually got customers on the platform, did you see that maybe what they needed was a little bit different than when you did your initial interviews?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say at this point, we were still pretty aligned with everyone, but I'll be talking in a second about the early majority, because that is when things start getting a little dicey there for a minute. But the early adopters and innovators, they actually helped us build a lot. They were there for a lot of our prototype development, wireframe development, so they were pretty bought into it at this point. But once you start to get into early majority, and just so you guys have context, so these are the folks where the pain is not as pervasive, right? So they're there's a pain there, they're probably managing it, well enough, and so now you are trying to convince them to break out of status quo. And so now you got to have some pretty cool bells and whistles, because they have something that's working enough, as opposed to these guys where everything's on fire. And so anything that you put in front of them, they're we'll take it. We'll take it. It's a bucket of water. We'll take it. But great question, Chad. Okay, and I wanted to show you guys too, I like this diagram a lot, because this is the iterative mindset that we talk a lot about in the startup world. So again, very traditional mindset is you wait, right? It's a waterfall development, right? So you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and then when you have the final product that you think is perfect, you ship it out in the world and you hope for the best, right? And maybe you'll get a few people that believe in what you're doing and what you're selling, and that's great, but that isn't always true. The iterative mindset and again, that lean startup philosophy is push what we call an MVP. So what's your minimum viable product? Get it out there in the world, get feedback, and then take it back and say, okay, cool, a lot of people want this, let's add this particular feature, push it again, and then see what happens, collect more feedback, take it in, push it again, and eventually you will get to the product that the most amount of people think can bring the most amount of value. So again, just different mindset in product development. Okay, cool. So now we are entering our scale era, and this is the fun part, right? So we found a product that worked. We were able to get those first initial sales, and so now we started to shift our focus into finding the repeatable and scalable model. We said that phrase so many times, I almost got it tattooed on my forehead. But that is really, really important. So you find something that works for 5 people. How can you find something and make sure that it's going to work for 500, right?
Is this your 3rd year now?
So this is probably about year 1.5 to year 2.5. Yeah, great question. And in this particular point of time, we started to build intra-team efficiencies. So looking at so looking at the sales team, looking at the product team, looking at the engineering team, how can we make sure that each of these teams is developing processes that, again, are repeatable, so they can be done over and over again, and scalable, can be done. So if your team is 1, that works, but if your team becomes 50, right, how do you make sure that that still works for a team of 50? From a product perspective, thankfully, we have found product market fit, again, just through a lot of the groundwork that we had done over about a year and a half, 2 years at this point. And then we started to focus on refining our product for the early majority, which is what we had chatted about before. So again, the early majority folks are the ones that already have a system that works enough for them. So you will find, and so I lead the sales team at SupplyPike, and the #1 reason why we aren't able to convert someone is because of status quo. So they have a product that works enough, it's free in their minds. It's costing them time in terms of efficiencies, but right now they already have a headcount, dedicated to it, so why pay extra, even though we're gonna free up 40 hours of that headcount's time to do other kind of higher order things, but that's me selling. So on a sales side, I think at this point, product and sales had developed an extremely tight feedback loop, which I think is really, really important. So again, a lot of times what happens is you have like the product guys and they're like doing product things and they're talking to customers, and then you have sales folks that are talking to prospects, and never the two paths shall cross, unfortunately. And that is a really, really big misstep. So we actually had our product and our sales team sit next to each other, so we were communicating all the time what customers were saying so that we could make sure that we were changing our sales pitches to match the prospects, what we were pitching to the prospects, and also communicating what the prospects wanted back to the product team so that they could start to incorporate that into their roadmaps down the road. So eventually we hit our first $1 million in ARR, so that's really exciting. And with that big confidence boost, this is when we started to begin testing pricing. So there's a really interesting concept too in startup world where they say if you can't sell something for $0, there's something wrong with your product, right? And so at the time we were literally selling things for like $99 a month. And that's like $1,200 ACV, average contract value. Our average contract values now are like northwards of like $30,000. So we have managed to 30x that in about 2 years, which is pretty cool. So we began testing pricing, and with this it's really interesting. So the concept of price testing is now you start going all the way in the other direction. So how far can you push pricing before people actually start to push back on you? And here's something I think is a little bit counterintuitive as well. There's the thing like, hey, if you're recommending pricing and no one is saying no to you, that's a good thing, right? No, what that means is your price is too low. Yeah. So we kept pushing pricing higher and higher and higher until people started telling us, okay, you're kind of expensive. I see the value, but can you make this pricing make sense for me? And that's when you know you've hit your upper limits. So if no one is negotiating with you and no one is telling you no, your pricing's too low. Ask for more money. So at this point, with people, our teams began to specialize. So remember how in our early days, you were the team, so you were the revenue guy. So now revenue began to split up into, so we had our customer development silo. So these were the folks responsible for actually bringing leads into us. You had new sales. So these are the folks that are actually responsible for converting those new leads. And then account management, because we have a book of business that we actually have to manage now. So these are the folks that were making sure that, our customers are happy and keeping them renewing and things like that. So yeah, at about the 2-year mark, managers, we started to get introduced. So the team is probably at about 50 to 60 at this point. And then from an admin side, we started to do things like weekly roundtables because we didn't all fit in a room anymore, which is crazy. We started to introduce playbooks for orchestration across teams, which again was a novel concept for us at the time because back in the day, when 15 of you sit around a conference table, you can just, hey, what's going on there? Hey, what's going on there? But now you have a team of 50 people. So how do you make sure that nothing is getting dropped? And so we're introducing, again, repeatable and scalable playbooks. So anytime a new feature is launched, anytime new collateral is launched, are all the right teams getting involved at the right times? And then this is the part where we begin learning which metrics drove results. So I just want to give a really easy example. So we talk a lot about leading and lagging metrics. But for example, I would rather have a salesperson that is, say, only sending 10 emails, but getting me $1,000 in revenue than someone sending 1,000 emails and getting $0 in revenue. Right? And so it's really easy to, if you're not tracking the metrics that matter, to look at your one salesperson and go, oh, you only sent 10 emails. You're not doing enough work. But if they are the ones that are driving the revenue for you, then you need to understand what activities they're doing in order to make that happen for you. So we started to get a little bit smarter about, again, which metrics actually drove the results that we needed. Any questions on this one, guys? Yes, Liz?
Pricing model.
Yep.
So I assume that was by the client, not by the SKU, right? That you were
Great question. So
And then the follow-up to that is, did you find that there was kind of a floor on the number of SKUs a client had where it made sense?
Yeah, no, that is a very good question. So in the early days, we pretty much we let anybody, if you had one SKU at Walmart, we're like, you're in, come join the club. How's $50 sound? But so our pricing model, we've tried a lot of different things. So I think one of the things that did really set us apart in early days were that we did a true SaaS model. So it's a monthly subscription. And to give you guys a little bit of context in our world, so back in the day, if you did any sort of deductions like management for a supplier, so there are a lot of other like consultants that did what we did, but they did it like using manual labor, so a person doing it, and they would charge a contingency fee. So they would say, I'm gonna go find you $1 million, but I'm gonna charge you 40% to do it. And it's because it's a manual process, so they have to be able to account for that. And so we were like, hey, it doesn't really make sense. Like, the whole point is to get money back to the bottom line. So it feels a little counterintuitive to say, hey, I got you $1 million, now write me a check for $400,000 to do that. So we introduced that we were the first company to do a SaaS-based model around this, and that's because we were the first company to have software around it, honestly. And so early days, we did monthly subscriptions, no annual contract. Oh, scary, yeah. So yeah, that got a lot of people in the door really fast, but then that affected churn, right? And people can cancel at any time. So you guys, anytime you want to cancel your Netflix subscription, just know someone out there is crying at Netflix because we're doing it. And again, kind of as we grew and as we matured as an organization as well, again, you focus on different metrics at different stages. So in the beginning, for us, revenue was king and kind of penetration in the market was king. But now our board really wants us to focus on retention because you want to be able to protect the territory that you have. So we now it's still paid monthly, but it's an annual contract. And we have kind of other cool bells and whistles with that. But great question.
So at
Sorry.
this point that you're showing us, you're not profitable.
No, not yet. No, we're still burning money here. We're still burning money now. It's okay.
You'll tell us when you will reach that.
I'll talk. Yep, for sure. Okay, so we got to the $1 million. And then we do, woo! It's very exciting. You guys, you don't understand, like, we had a huge party. I think we had bottles of, okay, we're a tech startup, so I'm sorry. We have bottles of tequila literally delivered to everyone's door. That's where we were burning money, it's fine. But we were very excited about this. And so how do we get from our 1 million to kind of where we are today? Find out next week. Kidding. I'm just kidding. We're gonna talk about it. So we were actually successfully able to raise, so after we proved to our board that we were able to have a repeatable, scalable model, and we had that kind of quintessential startup hockey stick growth curve, we were actually able to raise about $25 million in Series B funding in July of last year. So it's pretty exciting stuff. Thank you, guys. And now we have entered the era that we're in today. Yes, sir.
That's about the 15 that you initially raised.
It's in addition to.
So that's 40.
Yes, yep, so we raised 40, yep. And so now we are in the fuel era, right? So to the moon, which I think a lot of you guys, if you're on Bitcoin, you know what that is. But this is kind of where we are today, right? So the mentality, things have started to get fun, kinda. It's still a lot of work every single day, but we actually kind of know what we're doing, which is really exciting. And that's a really nice place to be because for a long time, and again, I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with this path, with this journey, it's like, are we doing the right things, guys? Like, should I go work for Walmart? And no hate on Walmart, they keep us in business. But, you know, it finally feels like we get invited to talks now. Mimi invites me to talks now. And today, so we started focusing on the inter-team handoffs, right? So in the past, we were really focused on the intra-team efficiency. So within each team, what can we do? Now we're really focusing on making sure that nothing gets dropped from team to team. So when we get a new lead, how do we make that as seamless as possible to sales, as seamless as possible to customer success, and so on and so forth. On the product side, we've really started focusing on what we call landing and expanding. So we've really cracked the code on Walmart and Sam's Club. And so I guess I mentioned earlier, we now support Target, Kroger, and Amazon. And next year we have actually plans to expand to 2 additional retailers. So we are going to cover about 56% of the retail sales that are done in the United States by the end of next year, which is pretty exciting. Kind of the philosophy that we're taking is we think we're getting pretty close to owning the world that we have. So how do we grow it? And then importantly, now thinking to 2025 and beyond, how do we discover new worlds? So, you know, at some point you're going to hit a point of diminishing returns, right? Where, you know, maybe the next retailer doesn't make as much money as Walmart and so on and so forth. So how do we go beyond just deductions in our case? From the sales perspective, we've really shifted from that SMB mindset to enterprise mindset because we're daring to dream, right? So before we only dared to go ask the mom and pops, like, will you please give us $50? And now we are actually working with, some of our customers include like Johnson & Johnson. We work with Hanes, Keurig Dr. Pepper, which is really cool to say. We're proud to say that. I think this has been kind of interesting for us. Retention and upselling are becoming increasingly important. So for a long time, new sales drove a lot of our revenue, and it still does. But now we're talking about how do we keep the contracts that we have, and then how do we upsell them to the additional retailers that we have. And then I think this has been really, really nice to see. This just happened this year. Lead gen has shifted from outbound to inbound. So what that means is when no one knows who you are, you're having to cold call and cold email everybody and shout your name from the rooftops and hope people will pick up your call and respond to your email. For the first time this year, more of our demos are coming from inbound rather than outbound. So people are Googling us, they are getting referred to us, and things are coming to our webinars, they're coming to our events. So it's really exciting. As you guys can imagine, this helps shift our, what we call a DAC, a demo acquisition cost, which then in turn shifts our CAC, our customer acquisition cost, down, so we can an even more efficient company that way. And then these are also usually a lot easier to convert because they're coming in warm, right? So they're Googling you, that means they're interested in something, and so, you know, makes the sales process a lot easier. From a people perspective, so retention has now become a focus. So we are about 104 full-time employees today. And so for a long time, we were focusing on growing. So hiring. How do we now focus on retention? So talent development, for the first time, we're having to do career mapping for people. Oh my God, who are we? Formal performance reviews. It's not go sit with your boss and be like, good. So we actually have a formal performance review process. We've started introducing pay bands because we have people with different experience levels. And we've also started recruiting more experienced hires. So when you start doing things like enterprise, when you start needing people to lead 30, 40 people teams, like the type of experience that you need at this point are different. From an admin perspective, a lot more formalized reporting and team rituals. So I keep using this example, but it's not 15 people in a room anymore. So how do you make sure, again, balls aren't being dropped? How do you make sure that you're getting everything shared? We focus on the metrics that matter. And this I'm really, really proud to say, again, part of our maturity, we're starting to introduce more things like DEI training, harassment training at the company. So that's pretty cool. So SupplyPike today, we are well over $1 million in revenue, actually pretty well over $10 million in revenue as well, which is really, really exciting, and that has been in a span of about 5 years. Over 100 full-time employees. We're headquartered in Rogers, Arkansas. Over 400 customers. These are some of the awards. So we have been a top 5 great place to work 3 years in a row, which is pretty cool. Fayetteville Chamber of Commerce has given us the Excellent in Business Award. We are one of the Arkansas Business of the Year recipients, and many, many more. So in the interest of time, want to make sure that I give you guys, some time to ask questions, or I'm here and happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On your last grid there, I saw that seemed like the first place that you mentioned outbound, inbound, so the marketing
Yep.
discipline. What role did marketing play in your kind of previous, age bands of your company?
Yeah, great question. So pretty early on, we made the decision that we were going to have content marketing play a pretty significant role in what we do. If you guys are familiar at all with the supplier world, there's no information out there to get. It's very all like tribal knowledge, and it's like you know who you know, and that's how you get information. And so we decided, in addition to kind of democratizing how you get your dollars, we wanted to democratize education as well, which is a very new age way of thinking, especially in supply chain, because like who talks like that? So we have a very, very strong content marketing team, and they created something called Supplier Wiki, which you guys feel free to check it out. It's just supplierwiki.com. And we publish free webinars, free articles, free ebooks. It's 100% free resources. And they were kind of, anytime, we use their product or their concepts a lot. Anytime we need to prospect to, hey, we're not ready to buy yet, that's okay. Come sign up for our newsletter, and we'll get you on the hook, and we're able to convert them that way. So marketing has played a really, really important role. I would say probably, honestly, starting at the scale age span is really where, because there wasn't really anything to market. So their support was more enablement, kind of early days. So supporting with like sales sheets, sales decks, and things like that. And then content marketing really started to take off in the scale phase.
Cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You all were able to raise the 15 million April funding. Do you think you all would be here if that wasn't?
That is a very good question. I think it would have been a lot more challenging. I think the Series A funding gave us a lot of room to make mistakes. And just being completely it's really cool to be like, look at us now, but we made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. Just to give you guys, so obviously we landed our deductions product now, and that's kind of what sells for us. In the early days, we had 9 applications, none of which had revenue. And so I think one of the things that we learned later was the importance of focus as well, because you kind of want to be everything to everybody, because everybody has a problem, right? Anybody that you interview, they're going to have a problem, and it's going to be their own specific, unique problem. And so I think the one thing that we learned later, and we had the time to learn with the Series A funding, is you have to find the one problem across the most amount of people and really focus in your efforts there. Because once you kind of are able to, again that land and expand concept, get that in and then start to grow from there. So that was a really, really big learning for us. Get a question back there first.
For those large suppliers, like about how long is the sales cycle?
Yeah.
What kind of goes into it?
Mm-hmm.
And also like for those, is the product the same for a large supplier as it is for someone with a single SKU?
Yeah, great question. So I'll take the easy part first. Yes, it's the exact same product, which is really cool. So our product is very scalable. It can work for the guy with 1 SKU. It can work for the guy with 40,000 SKUs, which is really nice. And then just so you guys know, from average cycle time, so our SMB, which we classify as anyone making less than $100 million at a particular retailer, so that we consider small to mid-size, average cycle time is about 45 days. And then enterprise average cycle time is about 120 days for us to convert. And then kind of what that process looks like is, so we will do an initial demo with them. We'll pull their data into our application, which is actually very powerful. Because a lot of times people will be like, we got it handled. And you're like, sure, why do you have $4 million outstanding then? And usually, we make that pricing make sense, of course. What takes a longer time with enterprise, as I'm sure you guys can imagine, paper process will kill you. The legal, procurement, getting 17 different teams in a room at any given time. And then you're also fighting, every team has their own internal incentives and goals. So kind of you're really trying to get like 17 ships aligned in one direction. So that takes a lot of time. SMB, like we can close a deal in 2 days sometimes if you talk to the owner and they're like, cool, that makes sense, let's do it. And we actually, again, more lessons learned. For a long time, we thought we had to be like the big, the traditional like Googles of the world and have these giant contracts and show people we went business. And it ended up slowing down our sales cycle significantly. So our MSAs, our actual annual contracts with our folks, are 4 pages long. Even with Kimberly-Clark, it's 4 pages, and with the guy that sells pickles, it's 4 pages. But it gets things done so much quicker because a lot of times they're like, that's it? And we're like, yeah, because, either it works or it doesn't, and we'll talk about it then. So, great question. I think we had a question.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
I'm Representative Joy Springer, and I serve in the House of Representatives. And over the past few weeks, I've been in meetings in the House wherein there are certain representatives who question the need for DEI activities. I heard you mention that
yes, ma'am.
Your company definitely utilizes that. Would you explain to us why you think that there's a need for DEI?
Absolutely, no. It's something, honestly, we wish that we had done sooner. I think one of the really cool things, so our senior leadership board is 60% women. And it's about 25%, minority on top of that. So I'm a double minority in senior leadership. My sister's the CEO of the company, also a double minority. And so it's really, really important, and it has helped, I think, number one, it's 2023. Like, we got to get with the times, right? I think whether whether other people like it or not, people's identities and being able to feel like they belong at the workplace directly impacts their ability to be productive members of the workplace. And so for us, DEI training was a signal to say, we want you here. We believe that you bring so much to this company. We value you, and it's important that other people understand how to have respectful communications, especially in Arkansas. It's hard. I think we all know that. And so it has helped significantly with retention. It has helped significantly with morale at the company. People have multiple times told, so we have the weekly roundtables, and at least once a quarter, someone will say, I can be my authentic self at work at SupplyPike, and that makes me want to show up every single day. So I think, especially for the younger generation, this matters, and that's important to them, that they can be their authentic self at work. It's not enough to be able to just like clock. No one wants to do the thing where you clock in at 8, look at a screen for 8 hours, and clock out at 5. So we have people that are like extremely dedicated to the company because we show them not only in our words, but in our actions that we're as committed to them as they are to us. So, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Oh.
It's a simple question.
Yeah.
So how do you manage to keep your team morale high while scaling into a business that's going to be profitable but not profitable at the time?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I would say the biggest lessons that we've learned is transparency. Earlier, kind of lessons learned, right? But in the earlier days, we were like, well, we don't want to like burden the people like with bad news or anything like that. So it never came from a position of like, we want to hide stuff, but it was more like, oh, they're not going to care. They're devs. Like, they don't care about the profitability of the company. How wrong were we? So I think we fixed that a lot with just transparency and a lot of open door policies at the company. So for example, we have something called Supply Chats, where every Tuesday and Thursday, leadership, so senior leadership, CEO, all the way through all the VPs, we serve coffee and donuts to our team. Tuesdays and Thursdays, to basically, again, first put a face to a name, right? And then also just show, again, servant leadership. And then it's also an open forum for them to ask any questions they want. So they know, like, at any moment in time, like, you can just walk into Dan's office and sit down and ask him a question. We also report on our company metrics monthly. So all the way from, like, number of people to profit. So obviously we don't do anything like, salary necessarily. But we're talking about all of our conversion metrics. We're talking about sales. We're talking about lead gen, profitability. We talk about the rule of 40, gross margin, all of that. So it's very, very open. Anyone in the company that wants to see it can see it. And I think, again, that just shows them that, hey, this is a company worth, like, they care. And so that's helped us a lot.